Hi, this is Jerry McLaughlin, co-author of the book Cold Wax Medium: Techniques, Concepts, and Conversations, and co-producer of Cold Wax Medium, a video workshop. Welcome to Ask Jerry and Rebecca, a video series answering all your questions about cold wax medium. And welcome to today's episode of Ask Jerry and Rebecca. Our question today is, how do you create and build thick impasto and bold textures using cold wax and oils? And this is a really good question, and it comes from Stephanie Dalton, an artist and graphic designer in Atlanta, Georgia. So to start with, lots of people choose cold wax medium for the fact that it allows you to develop bold, thick, emphatic textures as well as subtle textures. And before I start into how to do that, one of the things that I want to make sure everyone realizes is that cold wax's ability to do that relies really on its body. When you take it right out of the can, it's quite stiff, and obviously you can do a lot of things with it. Now, when you add oil paint to it in a ratio of about 50-50, very often that thins that body down just a little bit, and it usually gets it kind of right at the sweet spot for what you want. But some paints by brand, some colors, and then some grades of paint, particularly student grades of paint, are often fairly thin and runny, and when you add it to the cold wax, you get a mixture that really just doesn't hold itself up. And the way to test this is to mix your paint in at a ratio of about 50-50 to start, and then lift it up with your palette knife and see what happens. If your mixture holds whatever movement of paint you do without falling and sagging over at the top, then that's probably the right body. But if you mix it up and then you lift it into a peak and that peak collapses down, then that's probably too runny a mixture to really allow you to develop nice impasto surfaces and really bold textures. So you're going to have to do something to fix that. And the fix that we typically use is to add marble dust. You can start by trying just a little bit more cold wax. And if that doesn't do it, then you're going to need to add something that stiffens it up, and that's marble dust. And marble dust is really just calcium carbonate, and you need it to be fine enough that it doesn't add any grain to your mixture. And you can buy that at places like Dick Blick and other major art suppliers. So once you have that kind of mixture where it is able to hold those kind of stiff peaks like egg whites would, then you're ready to go. So let's start with impasto. And really what you want to do when you develop just thick impasto surfaces is you want to paint with bold, heavy applications of paint, generally using a stiff bristle brush or a palette knife. And once you get them on there, the most important thing is to not keep working them, but to allow them to have their body and not get stirred into other portions of the paint. And that's going to require patience. You're going to have to put those layers down and then really let them rest. And very frequently, you're not going to want a lot of things over that impasto surface because that's the surface you're actually striving for. So if we get back to then bold textures, it's a very similar idea. And let me look at my notes here. So some things I want to remind you if you're trying to build in really bold textures like I use in my large monochromatic work, and that takes some specific structure and planning. And first, you need to build in some contrast into your underlying layers, because when you build in that emphatic bold texture, you want to be able to see it. And if you don't have some kind of contrast under that texture, then it's really just not going to show up. So that's really important, to have contrasting underlayers. And then the second is you need to be able to build in some really bold textures. And that means you're going to have some decent thickness of paint on there, and you're going to have some kind of tool or surface that you imprint to create your texture that's going to give you that bold, emphatic texture. So pressing in something like crumpled tissue paper probably isn't going to build up very bold, emphatic textures. You're probably going to need something stiffer and more bold in its textural surface. Now, this next step that I describe is probably to me the most important, and that is patience and time. That when you press in those textures, you're going to have to wait. You're going to have to let them firm up and set up enough so that as you move forward with your painting, those textures don't get knocked down and flattened out. So if you build your nice thick layer over some contrasting foundations and you press in your bold textures, then you really just need to pause and give that surface enough time so that when you go back and work that textured surface, when you develop it further, that you don't knock down that texture. And that means you're probably going to have to wait at least a day and maybe 1 or 2 days. So that to me kind of summarizes the most important things about working with thicker, bolder applications of cold wax and oils. And that is, make sure that your mixture is thick enough. Make sure that you apply it thickly to whatever degree you want to create impasto or texture. And then the most important part of it is time. And that is, let those layers firm up so that as you develop your painting further, you don't destroy the impasto effect or you don't destroy those bold textures. And in fact, for the bold textures, that waiting and patience allows you to go on to develop those textures even further and make them feel more organic and integrated into the surface. So Stephanie, I hope that answers your question, and we appreciate you sending it, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.